I saw my father kill a man when I was 11 years old. He looked me straight in the eye afterward and said, "Don't you ever tell a soul, not for me, but for your mama." And I didn't. Not for 72 years. The smell of sun-warmed cotton still gets to me, even after all these years. Funny how memory works, it doesn't ask permission. It just rolls in like a summer storm, uninvited but unforgettable. This morning, when I stepped out on my porch and felt that heavy July air, something in my chest tightened, like an old drawer creaking open in the back of my mind. You know, some drawers you don't open. Some you keep locked with a ribbon of silence. But today I reckon it's time I opened mine. I'm not telling you this for sympathy, child. I've had a good, long life, filled with Sundays and sunflowers, grandbabies, and sweet tea. But there's one memory, just one, that's never let go of me. It clings like red clay on the hem of a church dress. And now, at 83, I think maybe it's time I gave it voice. If you're sitting there, listening, maybe pour yourself a cup of something warm, would you? And if my story touches you, even just a little, don't be afraid to tap that little heart down there, or leave me a word in the comments. I do read them, you know. These old eyes still got some fire in them. And you never know, maybe your grandma's got a secret drawer too. Now, where was I? Oh right, that smell. It took me back to 1949. I was 11 years old, skinny as a beanpole, freckles scattered like spilled sugar, and hair that refused to behave. We lived out near Yazoo, Mississippi, on a stretch of land so flat you could see Sunday come in on a Friday. Our house was a plain little thing with slats, tin roof, paint long peeled by the sun. But it was home. Daddy worked the cotton fields, and I followed behind him most days, dragging my feet and swat in at flies. Mama kept the house warm with cornbread and hymns. And everything felt steady, simple, honest. That summer was dry as bone. Folks argued more than usual. Even the birds seemed angry. I remember sitting on the back steps, eating a peach, when I first heard Daddy raise his voice. It was rare, him losing his temper like that. He was a quiet man, firm, yes, but he didn't waste words. So when I peeked round the corner and saw him shouting at Mr. Clyde, our neighbor from 2 farms down, I felt something strange curl in my belly. Like something important just cracked open. I didn't understand it then. Not really. But I knew whatever happened that week, it changed the sound of our house. The way my daddy looked at the floor. The way he stopped humming. The way Mama started praying louder but talking softer. And the way I stopped sleeping through the night. That one week in July carved a line through my life, before and after. And it's the after that stayed with me. That memory, it's like a stone in my pocket. I carry it everywhere, though most days I pretend it's not there. But you get to be my age and pretending starts to feel like lying. And I never was much good at lying. So why now? Why tell it, after all this time? Maybe 'cause truth, like a peach pit, won't rot. You can bury it deep, but one day it'll grow roots. And maybe, just maybe, it's time I let it grow. I saw my daddy kill a man. And I've kept that truth wrapped up in silence for 72 years. Until now. Those early mornings, dew heavy on the cotton leaves, hold some of my fondest memories of that time before the world shifted. I was just a little girl then, 11 years old and full of wonder, with bare feet that knew every bump and crack in the dirt path leading from our kitchen door to the fields. The sun would peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft apricot hues, and Mama's voice would drift through the open window, calling me to wash my face and tie my hair back before breakfast. I believed then that kindness was the most important thing, and that people always came back to the table for one more biscuit, back to the church pew on Sunday, and back to each other when troubles arose. In those days, our world was small and steady, wrapped in familiar rhythms and gentle routines. Our house stood on the edge of the cotton fields, a weathered wooden cabin with a tin roof that sang under heavy rain. Inside, Mama kept kettles simmering with sweet tea and cornbread fresh from the oven. The kitchen smelled of molasses and chalky sugar, and Mama would hum old hymns while she stirred. Daddy was already out in the fields, his broad shoulders moving in time with the rows of cotton, and sometimes I'd slip out to meet him at dawn, carrying a tin pail to gather wash water before the sun claimed the sky. I loved those moments, just the two of us, the world hushed except for the soft buzz of insects and Daddy's harmonica drifting from his pocket when he thought no one was listening. My days revolved around simple pleasures, chasing lightning bugs as the evening settled in, reading Little Women by lantern light on the porch, and helping Mrs. Carter next door shell peas in exchange for fresh eggs. We'd laugh over stories of her son gone off to the war, and I'd lean in close, imagining myself grown and brave. I dreamed of long skirts, schoolrooms filled with eager faces, and letters from distant places arriving in my mailbox. I thought life would always be this gentle, this kind. Sundays were a world unto themselves. We'd dress in our Sunday best, shoes polished, ribbons in my hair, and walk the dusty road to the little white church at the crossroads. The benches smelled faintly of pine and old hymnals, and sunlight streamed through stained glass, casting rainbow patterns on the wooden floor. I'd clasp my hands, close my eyes, and feel my heart swell with something warm and safe. After service, everyone gathered under the big oak tree for church picnic, fried chicken, jellied salad, and peach cobbler so sweet it made your eyes water. We shared stories and laughter, and I believed in the unspoken promise that life would always circle back to these good times. Evenings on the porch were my favorite. Daddy would sit in his rocking chair, harmonica in hand, playing soft tunes as Mama knitted or darned socks. I'd rest my head on Mama's lap, listening to her low voice telling me stories of her own childhood, of creek swims and scarecrow adventures, and I'd drift off to sleep half dreaming of cotton fields and summer breeze. Mercy me, those were the days when the world felt right. I had no inkling then of the storm brewing just beyond my sight. I saw people arguing over water rights, heard hushed voices late at night, and felt the tension in Daddy's jaw when he came home stained with sweat and worry. But I tucked those worries away, believing that love and goodness would smooth everything out. Little did I know that love could sometimes demand silence, and goodness could hide a secret so heavy it changed the sound of home forever. Yet in that innocent childhood, I held fast to my dreams, certain that tomorrow would always bring gentle light and that everyone would indeed, one way or another, come back. I was 11 the night it all changed, and I remember that moment as clearly as if it happened yesterday. I'd been settling into the hayloft to watch the fireflies flicker in the field below when I heard the low rumble of voices drifting through the crack in the wood. At first I thought it was Daddy and Mr. Clyde arguing about the irrigation ditch. Nothing unusual in that. They'd been sparring over water rights for weeks, but the tone was different this time, sharp and urgent, like thunder rolling closer. I climbed down the ladder and crept toward the barn door, heart pounding like a jackhammer. As I peeked through a narrow slit between the boards, I saw Mr. Clyde, taller than Daddy but lean, with dusty brown overalls and a face set hard in the dim lantern light, waving a hand at Daddy as though brushing off a hornet. Daddy stood firm, his back straight, arms folded, mud caked on his boots. The air smelled of spilled whiskey and tobacco smoke, heavy and sweet, and a night breeze that carried the distant call of an owl. Mercy me, it felt like the whole world was watching. Suddenly Daddy's jaw twitched, and Mr. Clyde took a step forward, voice raised in accusation. I couldn't make out all the words, but I saw Daddy lift that heavy iron crowbar he used to prop the barn door. Something dark flickered in his eyes, anger, fear, panic, I couldn't tell which. Then Mr. Clyde lunged and Daddy swung. The sound echoed like a gunshot, metal against bone, and I felt my stomach drop through my soles. Mr. Clyde crumpled, and for a moment the lantern light wavered as tears prickled up my eyes. I didn't understand exactly what had happened. Blood pooled on the wooden floor, and Mama's favorite blue lantern toppled, its light dancing across Daddy's trembling hands. Time stretched thin, each second a blade cutting through me. I watched, frozen, while Daddy fell to his knees beside the fallen man, whispering something I couldn't hear, tears streaking his dusty cheeks. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs refused to move. It was as if the barn itself held me in place, its dusty rafters conspiring with my fear. Then Daddy looked up and saw me, my small face pressed against the wood, eyes wide as saucers. His face went white as a sheet, and for a heartbeat he hesitated, crowbar raised like a judge's gavel, before dropping it to the floor with a clatter that seemed to shake the walls. "Go back to the house," he whispered, voice raw, and I heard the crack of it breaking. "Go on now, child." I didn't need telling twice. I scrambled backward, head spinning, ears still ringing, and heard him take a deep, shuddering breath before he leaned over Mr. Clyde's body once more. I stopped only when I reached the edge of the field, sweat dripping from my palms, and pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from shouting out. That night, under a sky dripping with stars, I made a silent promise to keep the secret, though I didn't know why. All I knew was that everything I believed about right and wrong, about family and safety, had shattered in that barn, and nothing would ever feel the same. That moment, seeing my father's hands in blood, changed me more deeply than any lesson at school, more swiftly than any whispered prayer at bedtime. It was the first time I saw the line between love and fear blur, and it left a mark on my heart I carried for decades. That summer's end brought a change so sudden I felt the ground shift under my feet, though I was just a child. One morning, Daddy didn't come in from the fields with his harmonica tucked in his pocket. Instead, he sat on the porch step, shoulders slumped, staring out at nothing. Mama's prayers grew louder, but her eyes grew sadder, and the house felt colder than winter's bite. The cotton harvest passed us by like a ship in the night, rows left unpicked, and neighbors started whispering about our empty fields. Word spread that the Walkers had sold off to town, though we never went. Instead, Daddy spent his days inside, nursing a jug of corn liquor, and Mama disappeared into her quilt room, stitching late into the night while humming hymns that offered no comfort. I tried to slip into my old routines, helping Mrs. Carter shell peas, chasing lightning bugs, but nothing fit anymore. It was like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small, every step pinched with memory. At school, I felt the shift too. My teacher, Miss Thompson, who always smiled and praised my neat handwriting, gave me worried glances when I stumbled over simple words. She asked if everything was all right at home, and I nodded, words stuck like thorns in my throat. Other girls talked of autumn fairs and apple picking. I heard them through a fog of shame, convinced they could see the dark secret clinging to me like cobwebs. I became quiet, my laughter a ghost of what it used to be. Even playtime lost its magic. When I tried to join the others, my heart drummed in my ears so loud I thought they'd notice. Some of them did. Janet Miller stopped inviting me to her birthday party, saying her mama didn't want troublemakers around. I wanted to shriek that I was no troublemaker, but fear curled in my belly, and I turned away instead. Home offered no sanctuary. Daddy's anger surfaced in slamming doors and sharp words. One afternoon, he told me I was seeing things, that no one else heard, the whispering voices at night. I wanted to scream that I heard Mama crying in the dark, that I saw Daddy's bloody hands in my dreams, that the ground in the peach orchard felt hollow beneath my feet. But I swallowed those words, because when Daddy looked at me, I saw not just a father, but the weight of life and death pressed into his gaze. I believed then that love meant silence, so I kept my mouth shut and learned to speak only when spoken to. Mama tried in her own way. She'd brush a stray hair from my forehead and murmur, "You're safe, child," though her voice trembled. Once, she prepared my favorite stewed apples and set them before me on the kitchen table, steam curling in the pale lamplight. She asked if I'd audition for the school play, something outside our small world, and for a moment I almost spoke, almost trusted her with the truth. But at the last second, the lump of silence lodged in my throat, and Mama sighed, the sound of a heart breaking so slowly it felt eternal. Then she changed the subject to the weather, and the moment slipped away like rain on a window pane. And so the dilemma took root. I wanted to unburden my soul, to whisper the truth into someone's willing ear, but I feared what that would cost my family. Would Mama leave us? Would Daddy go to jail? Would our little house lose its roof and our fields their promise? I wrestled nightly with that choice, as restless as an owl under a new moon. By day, I pressed my palms to the cold bark of the peach tree where Daddy buried Mr. Clyde, willing myself to feel the old warmth of those thrill-filled childhood days. But the tree had rotted away, just like the innocence I thought I'd never lose. In its place grew a hollow stump that caught rainwater at dawn, and I saw my fear reflected there, still and dark. I realized then that the secret would either swallow me whole or force me to find a courage I never knew I had. And in that knowledge, I understood that life in our little corner of Mississippi would never be the same. I remember the day the world split open like a ripe watermelon. It was early August, and the air hung so heavy over the cotton fields you could almost wade through it, each breath thick as syrup. I woke just before sunrise, pulled from sleep by a tremor in my bones. I didn't know then it would be the same tremor that would shake me for the rest of my life. Through the cracked bedroom window I heard low murmurs, too grave for ordinary conversation. My heart pounded like a gospel drum, and I slipped on my shoes without stopping to tie them, my small body moving by sheer instinct toward the front porch. There, in the pale light, stood Mr. Hendricks from down the road, his broad shoulders stiff with urgency, and beside him Sheriff Lawson, his star glinting cold on his chest. Between them, my father's shoulders sagged under the weight of his hat, the brim hiding eyes I'd once known full of laughter and song. In that moment, I felt time shatter. I remember how the minute hand on our kitchen clock twitched, hesitated, then froze as if it, too, could not bear to move past what was happening. My mouth went dry, and I tasted something metallic. Was it fear, or the memory of blood I could not yet name? I watched Daddy lift his chin and meet the sheriff's gaze, his face drawn in lines of guilt and exhaustion. Mama burst through the door behind me, her apron stained with last night's supper, and for a heartbeat I thought she would chase me back inside to safety. Instead, she stood frozen, eyes widening into pools of disbelief, and I heard her whisper a name I would carry forever, Clyde. Though the sheriff spoke softly, I understood then that the body in the orchard was no accident. I saw Daddy's hands, rough and scarred from years in the fields, tremble as he removed his hat and offered it to the sheriff. Mama's knees buckled, and I caught her before she hit the porch step, her breath catching in a sob that echoed through me like a church bell tolling midnight. I felt something break inside me, a shattering that left my bones hollow. As they led Daddy away, his wrists bound with cold steel, I wanted to scream, to tear open the sky and demand he be freed, but my voice dried to dust. I stood there, pinned by the weight of every secret I had ever swallowed, and watched the only man I had ever called father climb into the back of a black car with a door that slammed shut like the final page of a book. Mama clung to my arm, her tears soaking through my sleeve, and I realized in that instant that I had lost more than a parent. I had lost the promise of safety, the illusion that love could protect me from the tide of dark things in the world. Everything I believed about home and family shattered beneath my feet like dry clay. In the days that followed, neighbors crossed themselves when they passed our yard, and church bells tolled on Sunday in hollow rhythms. I learned what it meant to carry shame as a second skin. Every glance felt like a question. What did that little girl know? I wanted to tell them I knew nothing, that I was just a child. But the secret was living inside me now, a creature of its own that stirred every time I looked at the orchard or caught a glimpse of rust on the old crowbar. I remember how the nights grew long, each one stretching before me like a path I dared not walk alone. I lay awake, listening for the creak of my mother's door, the rustle of her quilt as she prayed for a husband she believed she had lost forever. That moment, watching my father taken away, feeling the earth shift beneath my feet, became the pivot point of my life. I realized truth could both free and destroy, that silence, once promised in love, could become a prison more confining than any cell. I lost my childhood that day, trading giggles and fireflies for whispers and shadows. And though the years have softened the edge of pain, that memory remains a raw wound under my ribs, reminding me always of the fragility of trust and the price of secrets kept too long. After that summer, the world around me seemed to hold its breath, as though waiting for me to catch up, but I was already somewhere else, lost in the echo of that morning when everything changed. I returned to our little wooden house on the edge of the fields, but it felt too small to contain the emptiness inside me. Mama moved through the rooms like a ghost, humming hymns that no longer offered comfort, and I followed her in silence, my footsteps muted by the dust on the floors. I learned to speak only when necessary, my voice hushed as though I might awaken the past if I dared to raise it. Days blended together in a rhythm of chores and prayers, but the chores lost their purpose and the prayers went unanswered. Each sunrise reminded me that time marched on, indifferent to the wound in my heart. I spent long afternoons on the porch, watching cotton bolls swell in the sun, trying to pretend that life could still be simple and kind, but every rustle of breeze seemed to carry a whisper of that night in the barn. I felt each breath as a betrayal, as though the air itself were stained with the secret I carried. Friends drifted away. Miss Thompson offered extra lessons, but I refused them, convinced I didn't deserve kindness. I stopped running with the other children, afraid their laughter would crack my silence wide open. In their absence, loneliness stretched out before me like the endless fields at dusk, and I wondered if I would ever feel whole again. My faith wavered next, crumbling like dry clay in my hands. The church pew grew hard beneath me, and the stained glass colors blurred into shapes I could no longer name. I tried to pray for forgiveness, for Daddy, for our family, for myself, but the words stuck in my throat. Each amen felt like a lie, spoken to a roof that offered no shelter. I clung to my Bible for a while, pressing its worn pages to my heart, but I eventually laid it aside, unable to read verses that spoke of mercy when I was drowning in shame. Winter came and went, and still the coldness lingered in my soul, long after spring had arrived. I took to walking the fields at dawn, the dew cool on my bare feet, hoping the earth would hold me up. Sometimes I'd find myself at the peach grove, kneeling by the hollow stump, fingertips brushing damp bark as though I could coax answers from its rings. But the stump was only wood, and the answers remained silent. In that silence, I felt the slow growth of something neither sorrow nor joy, acceptance, perhaps, or the first fragile shoot of resolve. I realized that though my childhood had been taken by secrets and fear, I still breathed, and breathing felt like a promise that one day I might find light again. During those long months, Mama began to stitch again, quilting patterns bright with daisies and stars. She invited me to help, her hands gentle on the cloth, and I sat beside her, threading needles and lost in thought. In the quiet of her company, I tasted a small comfort, proof that love could survive the harshest storms. I found myself talking first in whispers about the weather, then in soft recollections of happier days. Each word was a step toward reclaiming a part of me I feared lost forever. It was not an easy road. I stumbled often, my confidence fractured, my trust in people fragile as a spider's web. But with each sunrise, the weight on my chest lightened, and I learned that healing does not mean forgetting. It means carrying memory without being crushed by it. And so I lived through the long recovery of my soul, slowly gathering bits of hope like scattered seeds in the dirt, knowing that one day they might bloom again. One crisp Sunday morning, as the sun spilled gold across the old church steps, I felt something stir in my chest that I hadn't noticed in years, a faint, fluttering hope. It began when Pastor Jenkins spoke of grace and the power of new beginnings, his voice gentle yet firm as he reminded us that every soul, no matter how wounded, can find light again. I sat in the pew, hands folded on my lap, feeling the hymn swell around me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed those words might be meant for me. After the service, the ladies from the sewing circle gathered in the fellowship hall, their laughter a soft wind that carried promise. Mrs. Carter, bless her kind heart, patted my hand and said, "We're starting a Sunday school class for the little ones this afternoon. You ought to come and help." My first instinct was to refuse, to hide once more behind silence and shadows, but something in Mrs. Carter's eyes, warm and unwavering, nudged me forward. So I found myself at the back of the craft table, surrounded by 4- and 5-year-olds with sticky fingers and curious smiles, and I felt a spark travel from their bright faces into my own soul. As we traced handprints in colored chalk and read simple stories of lions lying down with lambs, I discovered that speaking aloud didn't always summon ghosts. Sometimes it brought gentle comfort. A little girl named Annie asked why Jesus loved her even when she felt scared, and the earnest wonder in her voice made my heart flutter. In that moment, I realized that my own fear, which had felt like a shackle, could become a bridge to someone else's safety. Encouraged by the children's trust, I spoke softly about kindness, about the way forgiveness feels like warm sunshine after a storm, and they leaned in as if I were unveiling a secret treasure. Their innocence gave me courage, and, before I knew it, I was laughing alongside them, the sound bright and new in my ears, no tremors, no trembles, only clear, ringing joy. From that day forward, I began attending every Sunday school gathering, then volunteering for midweek lessons, and eventually stepping up to lead a small group of neighborhood children in simple reading exercises. Each moment I spent teaching, guiding, and listening, I felt the hollow ache in my chest slowly fill with purpose. I realized I had a gift, an understanding of sorrow and a willingness to hold space for others, and that the very secret I had buried could be transmuted into empathy that helped young hearts feel seen. As I sowed seeds of patience and compassion in those classes, my own faith in people began to bloom again, tentative at first, like a wildflower pushing through cracked earth. But then more boldly as I watched shy faces light up with pride at their first completed drawing or learned verse. Outside the church walls, I carried that new impulse into everyday life, patting Mrs. Carter's quilt when she felt lonely, delivering a plate of stewed apples to the widow down the road, and even offering a gentle smile to neighbors who once shunned me in hushed tones. Each act, however small, felt like a brick in a bridge I was rebuilding between my past and my future. I found that when I reached out with an open hand, I was met not with judgment but with gratitude, and that realization weakened the iron bars of my own self-imprisonment. I began to envision a future unbound by silence, a life where love and truth could coexist without fear. In those quiet afternoons at the craft table, I discovered that second chances aren't bestowed by fate alone but are nurtured by simple choices, choosing kindness over retreat, choosing presence over hiding, choosing to share light where shadows once reigned. And as the summer heat warmed the cotton fields beyond the churchyard, I felt the first real warmth in my soul since that long ago night in the barn, a warmth that whispered, "You are enough. You are needed. You can begin again." That afternoon I found myself standing at the edge of what remained of the peach orchard, the hollow stump still there, moss growing around its cracked surface like time's own hand. I held in my palm an old silver ring, CM engraved in curly letters, pulled from a rusted tin box in the attic just days before. My fingers trembled as I looked out across the fields where cotton once stretched like a white sea, and I felt a weight lift from my chest. For 72 years I'd carried that secret like a stone in my shoe, hobbling through life one careful step at a time. But in that moment, with sun warming my face and breeze whispering through new green shoots, I knew I could carry it no longer. I pressed the ring between my thumb and forefinger and felt every memory. The sharp echo of the crowbar, Daddy's trembling voice, Mama's unshed tears slide free, spilling onto the grass at my feet. Then, with a breath that tasted of both fear and relief, I let it fall into the hollow and watched as it disappeared into the earth. A final act of letting go. Mercy me, I remember how the world seemed to pause, as if holding its breath for my choice. I watched the ring vanish and felt the first true shudder of release ripple through me. Tears welled in my eyes, not of sorrow but of some deep, cleansing joy. I had chosen to acknowledge the past not as a shackle but as part of my story, one that had shaped me but would not define me. In that quiet surrender, I forgave my father for his moment of fury and panic, and I forgave myself for the silence I never intended to keep forever. I closed my eyes, tasting the soft scent of earth and cotton, and imagined the years ahead unfolding unburdened. When I opened them again, I felt something bloom inside me, an ember of hope turned gentle flame. I walked back toward the house with lighter steps, as if gravity itself had relaxed its hold. Inside, Mama's quilt lay folded on the rocking chair, its daisies bright against the worn fabric, and I ran a hand over its surface, feeling the stitches catch on my skin like promises kept. I sat in the chair and placed my palms on the quilt's warmth, whispering aloud the secret I'd carried all these years. I saw my father kill a man in 1949, and I carried that secret until today. The words trembled through the quiet room, echoing in corners long unused by truth. Mama joined me a moment later, her eyes soft, and she took my hand without a word. In her silent embrace, I felt the barrier between us dissolve, and I felt whole. From that day forward, I lived differently. I spoke kindly to strangers, offered my story when it seemed needed, and let tears fall freely at the sight of sunrise or sorrow. I wrote letters to my children and grandchildren, including the truth of that summer so long ago, not as a burden, but as a testament to the power of honesty and forgiveness. I planted a new peach tree in memory of Clyde, straight and young, its leaves bright against the sky, and each spring I watered it, watching it grow taller with every season. The tree taught me that life continues even in soil turned over by grief. I chose to live on without pretension, without regret, simply moving forward. I learned that truth is like a seed. You can bury it in darkness for decades, but one day it will sprout in its own time, reaching for light. In surrendering my secret, I found freedom I didn't know I'd been starving for. And now, when I sit on my porch with a cup of tea, I can smile at the breeze and know that while the past shaped me, it no longer binds me. I chose acceptance, and in that acceptance I found peace, finally, at 83, a peace that feels as sweet as any ripe peach rippling on the tongue. Looking back now, I see that for so long I believed time alone would ease the ache in my heart, but I've learned that time without honesty merely buries our sorrows deeper beneath each passing season. When I was a little girl on that dusty porch in Mississippi, I thought kindness would guard me against all harm, and I believed that the people I loved could never do anything to break my trust. As the years slipped by, I discovered how fragile our assumptions can be, and I carried my father's secret like a hidden seed that sprouted only shadows. Yet what I've come to understand in these later years is that our darkest moments can reveal our truest strength when we choose to face the light rather than hide in the dark. I've learned that silence may feel like protection, but it too becomes its own burden, heavier with each day we refuse to acknowledge our pain. In the quiet of my kitchen now, as I sift flour for biscuits or water the young peach tree I planted in Clyde's memory, I feel the weight I shed the day I let go of that old ring and finally spoke my truth. I see how confession unlocked a gentle kind of freedom, one that allowed me to open my heart to forgiveness, both for my father's moment of terror and for my own decision to stay silent all those years. It revealed a simple truth, that healing does not come from forgetting what happened, but from finding the courage to carry our memories with compassion instead of fear. And so I stand here today, not as a woman untouched by sorrow, but as one who has embraced her past as the very soil from which new life can grow. My scars remind me of where I have walked, but they do not define the journey that lies ahead. I offer to you, dear listener, the quiet wisdom that life's most profound lessons aren't found in the absence of pain, but in the choice to welcome it, learn from it, and then let it guide us toward kindness and understanding. Perhaps you, too, have carried an unspoken truth in your heart, something you've hidden away, hoping time alone would wash it clean. But what if, right this moment, you gave yourself permission to unburden your soul? What if honesty, even when it trembles on your lips, could be the very thing that sets you free? It's not a promise of easy days, but it is the promise of a life lived fully, without shadows between you and those you love. Remember, the peach tree in my yard did not bloom because I ignored the hollow stump. It thrived because I acknowledged its place in the story of my life. So, perhaps it's time you stopped waiting and began speaking your truth, trusting that the world can hold you in all your imperfect grace. And now, dear friend, as I draw this journey to its close, I find myself sitting once more on that old porch, the sky above painted in soft pastels of early evening, and I feel an overwhelming sense of warmth that wasn't there when I was young. A warmth born not from sunshine but from the courage to face darkness and the comfort of shared stories. I want you to carry with you not only the tale of a little girl who held a secret too heavy for her years, nor just the memory of a father's desperate mistake, but the timeless truth that our past, no matter how painful, weaves itself into the very fabric of who we become. This story is not trapped in the dusty pages of a long-closed diary. It ripples through today, in the way we choose to speak our truths, in the compassion we offer when someone's eyes glimmer with unspoken pain, and in the gentle acts of forgiveness that bind us closer than fear ever could. I hope you feel, as I do now, that life's most tender moments often arrive on the heels of our deepest sorrows, and that love, true love, can circle back to heal where it once wounded. So I ask you, from one heart to another, do you believe true love should come back when it's been lost? Sometimes, on quiet mornings, I swear I see a familiar shadow by the peach tree, and I think he still remembers the promise of protection, the weight of my silence, and the grace of a second chance. I leave you with that lingering question and with a wish that you, too, may find the courage to let your buried truths bloom in the light of understanding, so that your life, like my peach tree, may stand tall and blossom in every season.